So now we're gonna see how to create our own custom exceptions so we can have more control over the abnormal situations raised or that happen in our particular code. So we had our previous example, we were using a simple turnstile or a lock, right? And we were trying to differentiate between two really different scenarios happening in our code. One of them was when someone was trying to add a coin with an invalid amount, either equals or less than 0. We're using just less than 0 here. And also we were handling the case when the turnstile should get open or unlocked, right? So that was also, we were raising a valuer to unlock the turnstile. But of course, as we said before, the previous code right here was kind of ugly because we needed to handle different strings, right, and check for different strings in order to differentiate those two scenarios. So now what we're gonna do is we will be using custom exceptions to fix this code. And the way it's gonna be fixed is just by creating these exceptions first. And this is kind of the syntax that you need, and we're gonna talk about it a little bit more in a second. But as you can see, we are just using class. We're providing a regular name, whatever name we want. In this case, going to be invalid amount for one of them and lock state open for the other one. I can use whatever name I want. There is usually a convention to put the exception word in it. And finally, and more importantly, you need to put between parentheses the exception word. So it's going to be an exception. And what is going to happen here is that I can now, instead of just raising two value errors as before, value error for an invalid amount and value error for the locked open, I can raise two completely different exceptions given that state that I'm trying to signal. First, invalid amount exception is going to be raised if the amount is invalid, and finally, lock state exception is going to be raised if the lock is open. So in this case, the code, and I want you to compare it with the one that we had before. We were checking for strings here, super ugly. Now the code looks much cleaner. We can just run a given function, this one right here, and we know the errors that might happen. Invalid amount exception is one of them, and also lock state open exception is the other one, and we are really sure about the one that was raised. We don't need to check strings or do anything different and ugly as the previous one. The type of the exception will be the one deciding which block is gonna be raised. So of course, if we go back again to the example of in the image of the turnstile or lock, you can think about all these transitioning states as different types of exceptions, and that's gonna give you a lot more control over your exception handling code. So once again, about the syntax of the custom exceptions you will be creating. This is related to object-oriented programming, and you will see more about it in the next unit, but we like to introduce it here too, so you start getting familiarized with it. Because for now, it's just as simple as memorizing it and applying it over and over and over again. How do you do it? You put the class word, then you define the name of your exception. Usually, again, convention is to put exception here, even though you've seen some built-in exceptions that finish with the error word, for example, index error or value error, key error, etc. For custom exceptions, it's usually recommended to put exception. And finally, this is important and needed. You need to put between parentheses and say this thing right here is an exception. It's going to make a lot more sense in our next unit. For now, you just need to kind of copy and paste this. Class, the name of your exception, between parentheses, the exception word, and also an empty block right here. And you have just created your own custom exceptions.